This is Akashvani. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on strengthening ties between India and Maldives. The participants are Yogendra Kumar, former diplomat, and Arjun Chaudhary, anchor.
Today our topic of discussion is on strengthening ties between India and Maldives. And today being May 10, it's a very important date to be considered because there is a repatriation of military personnel from the island of Maldives back to India. And what are the consequences of that? Economic ties are not meant to be broken, they're meant to be mended. And on this we would be discussing at length with the former diplomat with the Government of India, Shri Yogendra Kumarji. Sir, warm welcome to you on the program.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chaudhary. It's a great pleasure.
So, Mr. Kumar, do tell us about this situation where defense cooperation is no longer tenable to the extent that we had before, but we are looking to once again build economic ties, trade relationships. What's your take on this and what are the specifics between India and Maldives right now?
Well, actually, as I see it, I think it is in a way an attempt by the Maldives government to turn the page over because of the fact that, the Maldivian president, the current one, came to power in November, and that was quite a hectic campaign, and one of the campaign slogans was India out. So obviously something for a country which is so strategically important for us, we actually were watching it very carefully as to what the turn of events is going to be. So the fact that the timing of the visit is such that the foreign minister has come at the time when the demand for the removal of military personnel from the Maldives, that demand has not only been adhered to but agreed to in a manner which actually is satisfactory to the timetable and the arrangements on both sides. So I think you can see the timing is very significant. It's his first visit of the foreign minister. As you know, the president hasn't yet come to India. He had a meeting in January in Dubai at COP28 with our Prime Minister and basically made the same point there that they've been saying. And of course, I think even that is significant, that of course they said India out and China our best friend. He actually made a first visit to Turkey to distance himself both from India and China. But then he did go to China. And then, of course, the foreign minister coming here actually is making a beginning. So my sense is that perhaps in a way to assuage their domestic audience, they have actually in a way realized that it had a symbolic thing for them, symbolic importance. So having done that, having achieved that, because what actually happened is that these military personnel were operating 2 helicopters and 1 Dornier aircraft. So they remain there. They've been gifted by India. They remain there, but instead of the military personnel, civilian personnel have gone there who actually have the competence, because they're meant for various purposes. They're meant for medical evacuation. They're meant for disaster response. And overall, because Maldives actually is a country which actually has a huge number of islands. It has a very small land area, something like 298 square kilometers, but a huge number of islands. So its maritime zone is huge. So, there are the issues which actually relate to law and order on the sea, or what is called the good order at sea. And also the issue of providing the assistance to the Maldivian government for some of these kind of things they are faced on a practical daily basis. So that issue has been put aside and therefore a new beginning has started in that sense. The important thing here is that his visit was preceded by what is called a core group. And this core group actually came to discuss not only this particular issue, that's now a closed chapter, so to say, but also to discuss defense and development cooperation. So in one way, the sense I'm getting is that because of the fact that we are actually in a way is a turning point in that sense, that what actually the aim is now, both from Indian side and the Maldives side, that we have to actually maybe perhaps do more strategic thinking and also at the same time to, map our relationship forward in such a way that actually, in a way, in the changed geopolitical circumstances, particularly in the Indian Ocean, challenges there. So taking into account the newer developments, so it's a beginning from their side and we responded to that. And in a way, it's a kind of a strategic rethink, recognizing that our relations with Maldives remain very close in all aspects of government relationship, all aspects of people-to-people relationship. It's very close. So actually it's a very important country for us, for South Asia region. That's why it's part of SAARC. So you see that now things are changing a little bit, but I think there's adjustment on both sides to a certain extent. Without, as the External Affairs Minister said, that our strategic interests have to be understood and there's sensitivity about our interests, but of course, we want to cooperate.
So maritime neighbors are now getting the benefit of this exchange, what the Minister of External Affairs, Shri Jaishankar ji, is calling it as ties based on reciprocal sensitivity. So we have been sensitive to our maritime neighbors. So what is the reciprocity that we are getting from Maldives, or we hope to get in the future?
Well, I guess some of these things have been discussed by the core group, and later on I think the deliberations would be reviewed, have been reviewed, are being reviewed on a continuing level of minister and maybe with other agencies. But I think the point that the External Affairs Minister actually made was very clear that you had to be sensitive to our strategic interests, reciprocal sensitivities. So it's a message to be conveyed to them to say that yes, we are understanding that the situation is changing, but not just, let's say, not just in terms of the politics in Maldives, but overall in the Indian Ocean region. And therefore, based on these premises, so to say, or these principles, we will actually be developing our relations, because they talk about the further roadmap for our bilateral relations.
Mr. Kumar, there's a renewal of the quota. In fact, there's a 5% increase on that renewal for the import of essential commodities from India. We have rice, wheat flour, sugar, potatoes, onions and eggs. And this has gone up since the trade agreement way back in 1981. So going off on a tangent, the way Maldives has done, and then the way we are conceding right now to this island nation, what has led to this decision tangibly to Maldives?
I think one, perhaps, as I can see as an observer, outside observer, a lot of these things actually are said at diplomatic level, and formulations are actually agreed upon. But how they get implemented, what are the further developments, the future developments, that is something that is when you begin to understand the meaning of these kind of catchphrases. But actually it's very important, because despite the ban on export of these items, India actually said, we are going to give it to you. We have to actually, after all, it's a neighboring country. As I mentioned, how strategically located it is. So we can't turn our back on them. And because of the fact that, our relationship is very, very diverse in the entire spectrum of the government relationship, people-to-people relationship. If you look at the entire gamut of bilateral relations, actually it's very, very close. So for those reasons, it is actually important that you have to, in a way, respond. If the Maldivian government giving a signal that they want to turn a new page, and therefore we said we should do that. Because the important thing here is that despite the ban, we have done all that we have done for them. And it's very interesting that the Foreign Minister of Maldives made a very interesting response to that. While he thanked the government of India, and I put it within quotes, he said on Twitter, even as the ties remains tense in recent months. So in a way, acknowledging the fact that yes, that's what happened, but we realize that India is a friend, and Maldivian economy actually is not in such a good shape. It's heavily import dependent. It has significant external and inflationary pressures due to global commodity prices. It has weak public finances due to heavy subsidies. It's highly vulnerable to global and Indian Ocean warming. So you see, the point is that now a lot of things are happening in the region and beyond, because Indian Ocean is warming at a very rapid pace. And therefore we have seen the effect. We are feeling the effect in India, but Pakistan has felt, Sri Lanka has felt, and so has Maldives. So some of these kind of changes are such that they actually have effect on the biodiversity, the marine biodiversity, the food chain. So they actually have a destabilizing effect, not just in the economy, but even the climate system we take for granted. So you find that for these reasons, the economic vulnerability of the country, and consequently the political vulnerability, the turbulence because of that actually increases. So it's not in our interest that the country is actually highly unstable next door, because, as you know, that there have been very significant catches of drugs, hundreds of crores, and this is the area from where these drugs are being actually smuggled, arms, terrorism. In fact, Maldives actually has a very high level of Islamic radicalization. So in fact, on a per capita basis or population size basis, its population about just over 5 lakhs. Population this size, the number of people who are actually participating in the ISIS operations abroad is very high. Then, what you have also is illegal migrations. So you find that, these are the kind of pressure which are working, not only just the regional system, but also Maldivian economy itself. So that's why it's so important. And they realize that. So in a way, that thing has been reduced to a symbolic issue, and that they want to actually make sure that the relations actually develop between India in a long-term basis. In fact, the External Affairs Minister talked about how to strategically map our relations in the future.
Right. Mr. Kumar, then that just goes to the logical point as to why President Mohammad Muizzu should actually had reversed the decision. Instead of repatriating 88 military personnel back to India, they should have ensured the security of its island nation from these external pressures, so that, they can have proper governance in place and maintain good diplomatic relations with its neighbors like India.
So actually, I look at it a little differently. Well, I think actually that, of course, again, the Maldivian politics is highly fragmented. One party comes to power, takes a completely extremely opposite position, diametrically opposite position to the other party. So the other party which came to power, Nasheed's party, Soli was the president at that time, that India first, India is our neighbor. And then the other group said, no, India out. But the volatility of politics is such, because these are fragile kind of coalitions and groups of parties together, and they're actually very fragile. So now, of course, in the parliament, they've got a good majority, but in the municipal elections in Malé and the other areas, this Moizu's party lost very badly. So, you can see the undercurrent with this kind of turbulence. And I think really here is that we need to understand that dynamic. Because Moizu, for example, after saying whatever he has done, actually is an attempt made by them to actually turn a page. So we have to understand, in my view, that, neighbors are actually present a very complex challenge in a way. So you have to go along to a certain extent. If they're reducing the whole issue to a symbolic issue, in that case, well, put it behind us, and realizing that they are actually economically very vulnerable. Well, in that case, it is one way in which we can stabilize the relationship, and perhaps in a way, and make our strategic consideration very clear. You can't play this game, because, when Soli was in power, they were still negotiating with the Chinese, because the external debt was very high with the Chinese, and the external debt with India is very high. So now the Maldivian government sending signals that, please try to make the terms liberal and that sort of thing. So I think our message here, basically, that don't try to play one against the other. We are in the region, not going anywhere. And not only us, there is a whole, a global configuration of big powers, which want the power equilibrium in the Indian Ocean to remain as it is.
Now, Mr. Kumar, I would like to touch upon tourism, because tourism fell by 38% after their adverse reaction to India in 2024. And this were the figures. It could be much deeper than that, in fact, in reality, because the tourism minister now is into road shows, making pleas. We're talking about Ibrahim Faisal, that tourism is once again revived as source of foreign exchange, income earnings for the island. How do you see that revival taking place in Maldives after the concession that India has made to Maldives?
I think they all realize that they are vulnerable, because, most of the island countries, the economy actually is basically very fragile. Because if it's a single service economy, for example, or single commodity economy, you're far more vulnerable to both internal shocks and external shocks. For example, in Sri Lanka's case, as you know, because of COVID, their tourism sector just collapsed, and that's the main source of revenue. So I think the leadership in Maldives also realizes that you can play this kind of game that they've been playing up to a point. Beyond that, you can't. Because if you're economically vulnerable, and you know that tourism is your main revenue earner, you can't be annoying a country like India, because India actually is a very significant provider of tourists. In fact, the figure I'm reading was that 43% decline has taken place in the last 4 months. Chinese, of course, are moving in a big way, because they use tourism as a kind of a strategic tool to sort of, to expand the influence, that sort of thing, because the system is different. But in India also, we have a strong, the kind of comments which are made about our Prime Minister, it created a general popular revulsion. So they realize that, you are in a situation when you're actually economically vulnerable. You have to be a little more sober in how you actually conduct your politics, how you conduct your diplomacy, and how you actually manage your economy.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Yogendra Kumar, for joining with us on Akashvani and talking to us at length about strengthening ties between India and Maldives.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chaudhary. It's a great pleasure.
You were listening to a discussion on strengthening ties between India and Maldives. The participants were Yogendra Kumar, former diplomat, and Arjun Chaudhary, anchor. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani. You can listen to it on a mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may share your feedback about this program through email at airnsdtalks@gmail.com or WhatsApp on 9289094044.